90% of prescriptions are cheap generics, and the US has the cheapest generics. So we could definitely get by without using insurance on these low-cost medications, and we wouldn't have to pay these insane fees to the PBMs. They collect 40% of the cost on low-cost generics goes to the PBMs. If we cut them out, the costs come down, people appreciate what the cost of the medication is, and they can actually afford what they need.
You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show with Dr. Tina Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, I'm sitting down with Brad Hart, who is a pharmacy owner. He owns Forest Park Pharmacy in Fort Worth, Texas, and I have been following him on Instagram for a while. This man is on to something. This man could save Doge a ton of money. Here's what we talked about. Pharmacy benefits manager. These are the middlemen who actually are driving up the drug costs in the United States. It's crazy. The story is crazy and is going to blow your mind. And it left me feeling infuriated and frustrated even more. There's something insidious going on with this vertical integration that I have no idea how it's legal, but the health insurance company that you're paying your premiums to owns the pharmacy benefits manager, owns the pharmacies, and ultimately is dictating the prices that you pay on your drugs, and in some cases, extremely jacking up the prices. And in many cases, this is costing Medicare a fortune, and it's costing you potentially a fortune. So let's jump in without further ado. Get ready to take some notes. Hang in there. We make sense of all of it. I make sure to bring it back to understandable high points that you can take home with you and share with your friends and family, because what's happening is not okay, in my opinion. So let's jump in. Brad Hart, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tina Show today and taking time away from your busy schedule. I am obsessed with your Instagram page. You own a pharmacy in Texas, and your content around what is going on with drug costs in the United States, PBMs, and what it has to do with all of us is just, it's fantastic. And I had to get you on because I need you to explain this to my audience. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wild stuff. I just started talking about what was going on here because it sounded insane to me, but I had never heard anybody say it. So I thought I was crazy, but yeah, it's insane. The prices, the control that they have, the way that they're invisible. That's the one that really gets people, is that they don't understand that that's the company behind so many of these problems. So talking about it has been it's educational because every day I dig in and learn something new that I get to talk about. But it's been a lot of fun to share it and see people be blown away the same way that I am.
It's crazy. Every day your content comes up on my feed and you're like, Doge, I got some money for you. And it's unreal, like millions and millions and millions of dollars that are being mismanaged because of these pharmacy benefits managers. So can you take us back to some of the history of, like, didn't PBMs show up on the scene during the Obama administration when we got the whole insurance thing that he brought? Like, tell me about this.
Yeah, sure. So PBMs actually got started in the 90s. And they were originally because as we grew our employer-sponsored health insurance system here, we needed somebody to manage that massive amount of medications. You know, it didn't feel comfortable for them to go, we cover your insurance and just everything is covered no matter what. So they hired these companies to manage that for them. But then around the Affordable Care Act with Obama, that's when they really sort of took off. Before that, we gave them a little bit of control over the price of medications. We carved out some statutes from the anti-kickback legislation, which allowed them to negotiate rebates. That's really the key to their power. They have the exclusive rights to control our drug pricing through that method. And Affordable Care Act really solidified that, and everything kind of skyrocketed at that point. If you look at drug prescription price data, everything shoots up right around 2012. So that's really when it all kicked off for everybody. Specifically with those anti-kickback statutes, that's where they can negotiate rebates. So in the US, we get drug prices on this extremely high list price. That's like nonsense. Nobody pays this list price. Like if we're talking about, Ozempic or whatever, those cost like $1,000 list price. But your insurance plan doesn't actually pay that. And almost nobody pays the actual list price. We sell like barely any of those because you can get it cheaper so many other ways. The PBMs negotiate rebates or price reductions from that price, And so the only way you can get a real price on brand name drugs in the US is through the PBMs because of that anti-kickback.
Okay, so PBMs are pharmacy benefits managers. They were brought in the 90s because employers who were providing insurance for their employees didn't want to have to decide what was covered and what wasn't. So they hired this organization to do that job. And then when the Affordable Care Act kicked into gear, so I got my license in 2008. So I saw this happen in front of me and I was like, what is going on? And in fact, I even saw the list, or I don't know, I saw the wholesale price of drugs that, like, let's talk about fluconazole, which is a common antifungal. I remember for a minute there when I first got my license, we could get that wholesale for really cheap for a bottle, like of 100, really, really cheap. And then somewhere around 2012, 2013, it shot up to like $300 a bottle. And then it's since come back down to something more reasonable, like more like $30 a bottle. But I mean, I remember buying that stuff for like $5 a bottle. And it's just been that, even the little bit that I've seen of drug prices from the wholesale side, I can't even imagine what's going on. So explain to people how this works. Health insurance companies, PBMs, the drug stores, like many of the pharmacies, themselves, like CVS, Rite Aid. Is there a connection? Like, doesn't UnitedHealthcare kind of own all the way down in some cases?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a big mess. So that's called vertical integration is what we call that. So specifically with CVS, because they're kind of the monster in the room, even with all these big guys. CVS actually went out and bought a PBM, and then which was Caremark, and then they went out and bought an insurance company, Aetna. So they bought from the middle up. They bought everything above it. The other guys went kind of the other way. They were insurance and they bought down. But the main point is all of us are in these big vertically integrated networks. The reason that we do that is that they say that that's going to help save us money. If CVS sends you to their own doctor, they're going to save you money. If they send you to their own pharmacy, it's going to save you money because they can control those prices. Of course, that's total nonsense. They do not control those prices. They shoot those prices up, and then that allows them to retain a bigger part of our insurance. The higher the premiums are, the more that they can pay themselves, the more that they can keep within the company. So for instance, if you went to whatever doctor and they sent your prescription to CVS and you had CVS Caremark insurance, they're going to pay CVS's pharmacy about 3 to 5 times as much as they would pay my own independent pharmacy.
The PBM is, or the insurance is?
Well, the PBM manages that part of the insurance. Yeah. So they're like the same.
Okay. So it's preferential treatment and payment to the pharmacies they own.
Exactly. Yeah. And they actually use that. So that difference, they pay their own pharmacies more than they pay independent pharmacies, but they don't charge less. So the way the insurance works is you pay your insurance payer, right? If you have employee-sponsored healthcare or if you have Medicare, then you pay somebody else that then manages your prescriptions, right? So they don't charge less if you go to CVS Caremark than you do if you go to my independent pharmacy. They just pay less. So that difference in the middle there is called spread pricing. They just keep that money for themselves right in the middle without it going to a provider. It doesn't go to the cost of the medication. It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays with the PBM. And so by doing that, they're able to control their competition. One of the big things that's been happening lately is Walgreens and Rite Aid really struggling. Rite Aid's out of business. They're gone. Walgreens has sold for like pennies on the dollar, and they're going to get strip mined by private equity, I'm sure. But the reason that happens is because reimbursements for non-PBM owned pharmacies like mine, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Walmart, they get paid so little that they can't stay in business. But drug costs haven't gone down. They also haven't gone up. Drug costs have been pretty stable. What's gone down is the reimbursements. So everybody's premiums are shooting up. The payment to non-PBM pharmacies is dragging down, and the PBM pay is just shooting through the roof.
That's insane. That's a racket.
Yeah.
That's a complete racket.
Yeah.
And then, so United, I saw a big thing on one of the independent, like real, like middle ground, just more centered political pages. They did a whole workup video on like UnitedHealthcare and that vertical integration, and they brought it all the way down. And it was just mind blowing to see how they own every single step of the entire process. There's, I don't even have words for it. Like it's maddening and it's sickening. And the poor person at the end of the trail is the one getting screwed, because this makes sense now why when I first started in practice, so I've never contracted with any insurance companies. I've always been payment at time of service, and I've always been just solo on my own, doing good work in my little clinic. And I would try to play nice with some patients' insurance because they needed me to, right? So like they needed certain things, like what could we do to get labs covered? What could we do to get, because I wasn't in network with anybody, so a lot of times they couldn't get anything covered. What could we do to get their pharmaceuticals covered? And I noticed this push from them wanting me to, I would get these like faxes over the fax machine saying, you should try, or you should prescribe your patient's medication in 90-day supplies and our mail away, whatever. And I was like, what is this 90-day thing? Like, do they really want people? I'm a naturopathic physician. Like, I'm not a big fan of putting people on medication forever. I'm a big fan of getting people off of medication. But if they really need it, I understand that sometimes. But like, it went from this, you go to the pharmacy, you get the medication you need in a pinch, like an antibiotic or something short-term, to suddenly this very chronic care model where your patients are presumed to be on this medication for life. And now we want you to send away to these mail away centers. Do they own those? Is that how this started? Like, do they own the places where we're the big, I mean, I think it was even Walgreens was doing like the mail away. What's all that about?
Walgreens tries to do everything, but they don't own the reimbursement. That's the problem that Walgreens has. But the guys that do own it, Express Scripts, Optum, CVS Caremark, those are the big three PBMs, and they all own their own mail order pharmacies. Retail, obviously, also with CVS, but mail order is where those other three really want to do it. And they're three of the 4 biggest pharmacies in the country, which is insane. Like Express Scripts, nobody uses Express Scripts. Somehow they've just pushed all of their patients over there on these mail order where they charge. Some of the prices that they charge are literally 10 times what they would charge at my pharmacy, which is crazy. But the reason that they want to do that, and they do this, they did it to you just by these nice faxes. But now that they've got this vertical integration happening, the doctors within their networks are financially incentivized to send the prescriptions to their own pharmacies. We actually had a patient here that was filling 3 different prescriptions, I think. They were everything at my pharmacy is like $10 to $20 about. And so she had 3 of them. We were doing like full 90-day supplies. It was lasting a long time. $30 about was what she was paying on everything. But her doctor convinced her to switch back to their own pharmacy. And the reason was it affected her star rating. And if her star rating gets high enough at the end of the period, whatever it is, she gets a bonus to pay to her employees. So the more prescriptions that they have on their own specific pharmacies, the more money that the doctors actually make, which blew my mind.
That should be illegal. That's
right.
So in my world, just so the audience understands, I cannot function as an entrepreneur. I'm sure you can't either in many aspects because we cannot take kickbacks. So like, say I were to send a patient over to an imaging, I'm just sharing this with the audience. If I were to send a patient over to an imaging center because I like the imaging center, that imaging center cannot give me some kind of kickback for that referral. That's illegal in medicine. It's highly illegal. So building a successful practice and a successful business in medicine is very challenging because we are not allowed to do what other entrepreneurs do, right? Like we cannot accept kickbacks. That all sounds very kickbacky to me. Like those are some very gray lines that you're talking about. And I know they're probably, skating around it, but like that to me just sounds like blatant. I would get my ass handed to me for doing something like that. If
that's how the whole system feels. Like they can do things that nobody else can do. That's one of the most common scams that you hear about pharmacists or pharmacies getting busted for. The Department of Justice, almost every day you can go on their website and read about some pharmacy that did this. They paid a doctor to write a prescription for something that reimburses a high amount. So then they all go to jail for it. Meanwhile, that's how the system is built to operate for these large companies. Every layer of it is built to increase the reimbursements that they collect. It's insane.
It's insane. It's insane. And that's not even talking about how corrupt I think health insurance is at the core. I mean, that is a whole other conversation, but just this pharmacy this is like the trickle down impact. And what really gets me is I live in a tiny little town in the middle of Oregon. It's like a little food desert town. And the big town down the street, that's 15 minutes, 20 minutes away, is also a tiny little town. And it has a Walgreens and it has a Rite Aid. And it has an Albertsons grocery store that has a pharmacy in it. So the Rite Aid is gone. It's going down. The Walgreens looks like a desert in there. Every time I go in there, it's just chaos. Like the staff are not that great. The place is never clean. Like it looks like but the pharmacy window is, the drive-through pharmacy window is always packed, but the poor store itself is not doing so well. If Walgreens goes down, where am I supposed to go get my emergency antibiotics, right? If I have some kind of like very acute illness and I need an inhaler, or I need, that's the stuff that I prescribe to patients is usually the stuff in a pinch. And my husband recently had a terrible poison oak reaction. And it was bad. It was progressing very quickly, very, very badly. And I was like, dude, we got to get some prednisone in you fast. And I didn't have any on hand. I cannot believe it. But it took us like 8 hours to get his prednisone prescription filled. And by that time, it had really gotten out of hand. And I was so pissed. And I was like, we were in some small town in Oregon, not our hometown, but we were away on business, but like a few hours away. And I was like, this is what's going to happen. This is where it's going. And people don't realize this. This whole vertical integration nightmare is happening. And at the same time, it's taking out our access because the folks around here, they don't really do chronic medications. And the mail order pharmacies, all that's doing is supporting the chronicity of chronic pharmaceuticals. Like, I'm not a fan of that model either, of like putting people, lifers. Like, I'm not a big fan of like, let's just keep adding on the meds for life. So the whole model in and of itself, to me, is just not only corrupt potentially, but in my opinion, but just really not helping with the overall health of Americans. And Maha is over here trying to Maha, and Doge is over here trying to Doge. And you are literally, in my opinion, like, you've got your finger on the pulse of the biggest problem, but I don't know why people don't want to seem to hear it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the rural thing, you nailed it. That's where it's really going to be a big problem, because I'm in an area with tons of pharmacies. We could shut down 10 of these pharmacies and nobody would lose anything. You'd have to drive an extra mile or whatever. But rural areas, it's going to be a huge problem. And the PBMs, they have like some token words that they use when they're talking about them. They increase the reimbursement for those areas. I know in all my independent pharmacy Facebook groups that I'm in, people are trying to get the rural pharmacy label so that they can increase their reimbursements. But the main goal that these guys want is they want you to fill it at their own pharmacy, where these outrageous reimbursements get collected. Mail order is perfectly fine for them. They don't care if they don't have a retail front in rural Oregon. They just want to make sure that as much of it is going directly to them as possible.
So what is the plan then? What does the future look like for, say, an area like mine, where, they've got to have some kind of retail brick and mortar or something, don't they? How is a kid with an earache supposed to get their medications?
I think, and I tell this to pharmacy owners all the time, that the model that I have, where we don't accept insurance, we didn't even really talk about that, but my pharmacy doesn't accept insurance. We're what we call a cost plus pharmacy. That means we just charge the cost of the medication. We have a markup, which is 15%, and then you have a fill fee. So it's like a body shop where you go and you get parts plus labor. And because of that, you can actually see what the cost of medications are. And in the US, we have some of the cheapest generic medications in the world. Nobody has any idea that that's the case. 90% of prescriptions are cheap generics, and the US has the cheapest generics. So we could definitely get by without using insurance on these low-cost medications, and we wouldn't have to pay these insane fees to the PBMs. They collect 40% of the cost on low-cost generics goes to the PBMs. If we cut them out, the costs come down, people appreciate what the cost of the medication is, and they can actually afford what they need. I think pharmacies around the country should not be accepting insurance at the independent level. If we cut that out, they can have the expensive brand stuff as long as they're, regulatorily, I'm restricted from competing against them. But on these low-cost brands, everybody could be selling these extremely cheap. And the problem is that if you accept insurance at all, if you sign their contracts, you can't offer my prices. That's why my prices are so unique. The contracts say that they'll pay the lowest of two things: my usual and customary cost, or their reimbursement rate, which is a nonsense number based on nonsense other numbers. But the usual and customary, if my usual and customary is too low, then they won't pay me at all. So I actually lose money on the prescriptions if I offer a real price. So the only way to get by is to sell it for a nonsense price. When you get those cash prices that don't have your insurance run through it, and it's like $400, and then they say that they saved you $375, that's the cash prices that we're talking about. Without accepting insurance, I can get that out of the way and sell it for the actual cost of the medication with a fee that then actually lets us operate instead of running us out of business. One of the crazy things was when we started, I took all insurance plans. We were just going to be our little local pharmacy where we could help out the neighborhood. I assumed that the problem with insurance that people talk about was that they were just like a pain to deal with. I'd be in audits and on the phone a lot, whatever. But what actually happened was I was losing money. We were open for 4 months and they had paid us less than the cost of the drugs, 2% under acquisition for 4 straight months. So it's impossible to run this way. Drugs are cheap. People can buy them, the low cost ones. So I think if everybody switches to this model, we'll see some big time improvements. Prices will go down. I don't even have to compete on price right now. If I was competing on price, who knows how low we could get this stuff, you know?
No, I totally agree. That's how I ran my practice. I mean, it was just the price of what it cost. There wasn't any extra surprises. Everybody got an estimate, so they knew exactly what they were going to pay. And I took no insurance because the way that health insurance works, just for the listeners, just really quickly, is say I charge $200 for a visit. If I were to bill insurance, they would say, sorry, that's only worth like $175 to us, and we're only going to pay you a percentage of that because you're contracted with us. And so what happens is the doctor has to jack up the prices. It's crazy. So like if you end up in the hospital and you have no insurance, you may actually end up coming out with a lower bill in some cases than if you go in with insurance and then they do their little game and dance because the hospital has to jack up the prices to even get anything decent out of the insurance company. It's a whole mess. Let me ask you this. I had a scenario happen recently and I think you might have an answer because I don't know what happened. I walked up to the pharmacy and I had to get an antifungal medication. It was prescribed by my doctor. I hand them the prescription. They said, we'll fill it. I wait around. I dink around the store. I come back. I have a coupon from GoodRx that I just pulled up on my phone. And I go to hand it to her and she goes to scan it. It's a nice old lady. And she said, well, I actually have a coupon here for a lower price. And I said, great. No one had asked me about my insurance at that point. All of a sudden, a young gal who looks more formal, jumps out from the back and she said, at first they asked me if I wanted to consult with a pharmacist. I said, no, I'm a doctor, I'm good. Then this young gal jumps out and she said, do you have insurance? And I said, yes, but I think it's lapsed and it's Kaiser and like, it's garbage. It's not going to be anything. And then she said, no, we have to run it. So I knew at the old gal, after she ran the coupon, I think I was going to pay like $10, $12. She had already said that price. This gal jumps in, runs the insurance doesn't cover it. Now it's $27. And I said, can't I just pay we had a thing going here. And she's like, no, sorry, because you have insurance. What happened there? Like, I don't understand what that was.
You probably were looking at those manufacturer discounts, and the manufacturer discounts have different stipulations on them for different drugs. It's all negotiated behind the scenes, so it's a huge mess. The thing that is also confusing to people is the discount cards themselves. Like you said, you were looking at a GoodRx thing.
What is that?
GoodRx actually charges a fee to pharmacies, by the way. Like if I run GoodRx, I have to pay them $9, even though they didn't do anything. Like they didn't buy the drug, they didn't dispense it, prescribe it, they did nothing. So those are a mess. But what's happening with these discount cards now is they're integrated into everybody's insurance. So when you run a prescription behind the scenes, it automatically checks if there's a lower price discount, and then it sends it at whatever the lowest price is. Now that's good. We all want the lowest price. But the problem is that doesn't go towards your deductible. It's totally hidden. And now that they've integrated into the system, those are PBM discount cards. So the PBM is setting the high price, they're setting the reimbursement cost, and now they've solved it by offering these discounts. Okay, and just like GoodRx, the discounts come with fees. So they lower the price and then they collect whatever fee. It's like $10 to $30 fee that they're getting from the pharmacy for allowing you to lower this price. And people have no idea. It looks just like insurance when you check it out. A lot of times, even the pharmacy doesn't realize that it's a different thing than just regular insurance. It's bananas.
So you guys are getting hit with a fee for the patient to be getting a discount.
Yeah, exactly.
So this makes me all wonder, because I have a good friend, like I said, who's a compounding pharmacist, and he's gotten himself out of his pharmacy. It was owned by a couple of folks, and he got himself out because he saw the writing on the wall. I feel like they're trying to shut down independent pharmacies.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. That's what the spread pricing stuff and these low reimbursements, it's totally to control the competition. Independents are just, we're just gnats. They could just swat us away like nothing, They're aiming that stuff at the big guys, Walgreens. But it's definitely to drive out competition. They're trying to steer patients to their own pharmacies, higher reimbursements, kick out the competition, and then they're all that's left, and they get to be all the solution, even though they're actually the problem. Absolutely.
These are the PBMs doing this.
Yeah. Well,
this whole vertical
thing. It's hard to tell who in this whole thing, because CVS is owned by everything. They just promoted, they got a new CEO. They promoted him from Caremark. He was the PBM CEO within the company. He got promoted up. So it's hard to know who in this whole network is actually running the show, but it's all the same thing.
It's so maddening. It's oh man. When I was a kid, you could go to the doctor, and my mom, we were like a lower blue class, like lower, we were like the poor people in the rich town, Right. We were like lower middle class, but we were fine. We were comfortable. My parents were great. I had a great upbringing, but my mom could take me to a specialist and write a check. When I was a kid, I was a really sick kid, and I was in and out of doctor's offices all the time. So I watched this whole thing go down. I watched this whole thing happen. And then when I got into medicine, I was vehement that I was not taking insurance. I took so much shit for that. I don't know if you caught grief for not taking insurance, but man, people have an opinion on that. Like, well, how am I supposed to afford care? You need to be accessible to everybody. And I was like, I am. It's called a credit card. And I charge really fair rates to make sure that people can access me, but I'm not dealing with this third part. It's like the mafia to me. I feel like health insurance in and of itself is like dealing with the mafia, and then add to it now this vertical integration where they own everything all the way down to, it's just crazy. Like the last vestige of cool medicine was the pharmacies, and now that's not even, it's bonkers. I have a friend who told me recently, he owns a pharmacy on the East Coast, and he told me that they are just telling patients that they don't have Ozempic and Mounjaro in stock because it costs them more to buy it. Their reimbursement is lower than what it costs them to buy it, which is, I think you've already touched on that. So in some of these particular medications, your pharmacist may say they don't have it in stock, and that's because because they're choosing not to carry it.
You're not allowed to tell the insurance, if you accept insurance, you're not allowed to tell the patient that the reason that you're not going to give them their medication is because the insurance isn't paying enough money. You're breaking contract if you do that. So the only way that pharmacies can avoid that is by being out of stock. Even though it's available for them to buy, you just have to pretend that you can't get it, and they have to go look somewhere else in order to do it. It's insane. But what you were saying about them being like the mafia and people being upset about not being able to accept insurance, what drives me insane is I've got all these numbers. They this percentage of our fees and this percentage of the rebates they collect. But the thing that they also do that's invisible and unquantifiable is raise the cost of medications. Because like I said, they have the ability to negotiate those rebates. And the rebates, they get a percentage of however much they save. So they want to save more money, which sounds like a really good way for us to build our system. Whoever saves the most money gets to make the most money. But the problem is the more money that they save, or the only way for them to save more money is by raising the cost of the medication. If it's a low-cost medication to start with, they can't offer a big savings. So they need the medication to be very high cost in order for them to save a large amount, and then they get a bigger percentage. Their dollar amount is bigger because it's such a high amount. So if we got rid of them, what would the actual cost of these medications actually be? Things would be much more affordable if they were out of the system entirely, in my opinion. That's why the rest of the world is able to be so much cheaper than we are here. They have to raise the cost in order to be on the insurance plans here.
Wow. This is maddening. Talk about some examples, because you give great examples on your social media posts. Well, before we jump ahead, you mentioned CVS. Let's talk about what's happening in Arkansas with CVS. Like what just happened there?
Yeah. So Arkansas passed a bill that banned PBMs from owning pharmacies, and that's one of the worst incentive structures that we have, where the person who tells us how much drugs cost also gets to be the person that collects the money from the drug costs. So that automatically would want them to raise the costs. Arkansas saw that, and they passed the bill that no PBM can own a pharmacy. So CVS, rather than saying, okay, we'll stop doing PBM work in the state, they went, well, we're going to get rid of all of our CVS locations. So 23 locations is all they have there, but they're leaving the state entirely. I don't know how Express Scripts and Optum are going to handle it. Their mail order, I assume they're going to stop shipping to Arkansas as well, but they are long gone. Arkansas, it's really aggressive from a legislative perspective to like ban the ownership. They're really digging in there. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Now, it doesn't solve everything because they're gone. CVS is gone, but CVS isn't really the problem. CVS Caremark is the problem, right? The PBM. So the PBM is still going to be paying all the pharmacies in the state. So, are they going to suddenly change the way that they operate and pay pharmacies well? Or are all the pharmacies in the state going to be under just as hard a pressure as they were before? There's just not as many people to compete against now.
So the only thing that changed is that the PBM cannot own the pharmacy, but they're still going to be the ones responsible for reimbursing the pharmacy.
Correct. Yeah. And 90% or 80% of prescriptions run through those big three PBMs. So almost everybody is still going to be on those plans. It's just not going to get sent to their pharmacies anymore.
Wow. Okay. So before we go on to some examples, catch me up on what your take is on the implications of Trump's most recent executive order where he's going to promise to bring down drug prices.
Okay, so the most favored nation pricing, that's pretty interesting. They sent out a thing with details about it right afterwards. Basically, any country with GDP within 60% of ours, that's who we're comparing against. And we have to be the lowest price in that area. The prices are much lower there. That's great. So I think that they can make that happen. He's going to use the FDA, kind of threatening these drug companies if they don't do what they're told, like they're not going to be able to sell here or whatever. And I think they can kind of pull that off. Seems crazy that they can just change the drug prices, but they might be able to. But there's a couple problems with it, in my opinion. First of all, we're going to have this new metric for prices, the most favored nation price. And drug prices in the U.S. are all centered on metrics right now. We have one called AWP. That stands for average wholesale price. That sounds like a great way to do drug pricing, but it's not. They've totally manipulated it. It's like 100 times what the drugs actually cost now. So if we have this metric that somebody sets, it's probably going to get manipulated over time. So that's one problem I see with it. Second is in the rules about this most favored nation price, it says that if they have a generic, then they're not subject to these prices. So anything with a generic can charge whatever they want. So normally you would think that's not a problem. We'll just buy the generic if they charge too much on the brand. But what has happened is these insurance companies and the PBMs have done a thing called formulary exclusion. That means that they exclude certain things from their formulary. They don't cover the brand and all the generics of the same type of drug. They exclude any of the competition. One manufacturer negotiates a good deal with the PBM so that they can be the only one in that type of medication that's covered. This just happened with CVS Caremark. They contracted with Novo Nordisk, and right. So Ozempic is the only one that's covered. Eli Lilly is gone. No more Zepbound for anybody. That's because they paid more. They do this all the time. In 2012, there were 0 of these on insurance plans. This didn't exist in 2012. Now, over 600 medications on each of the 3 plans. They each have 600 of their own that are formulary exclusive. So there's only one medication you can get. Now, because of that, a lot of those are more expensive brands. Humira was one for a long time. Humira is one of the most expensive drugs in the world. And for 2 years, there was a generic alternative. It's not a generic, it's a biosimilar available. But it wasn't on any of the plans because the CVS Caremark didn't have a good contract with these alternative companies. So Humira was still covered, even though a much lower cost alternative was available. So the most favored nation price, if they allow companies with a generic or biosimilar alternative to charge their own prices, then the PBMs can accept just the more expensive one, and we're all stuck still paying the higher price anyway. So it's a little bit of a loophole in there. as to whether or not these prices will actually get here. We'll see. I think that they'll solve some of the price stuff right away, and then the PBMs will start poking holes in everything, and we'll be right back out the window. The more interesting thing on this most favored nation executive order, though, was the direct-to-consumer stuff that they allowed. And I was always really interested because I'm sure you saw the direct-to-consumer Zepbound and
right.
That always struck me as odd because they sold it and they said, here's your non-insurance price, and it was cheap. Right? Yeah. Much cheaper than insurance. And lots of companies have tried these lower prices without insurance, and they always get sued by the PBMs for overcharging insurance, is what they say, even though it's actually a lowering the price. But that happened right after Trump talked to the manufacturer. So I wonder if they talked him into it and they knew what was coming. But that is a way that we could get around the PBMs. If the manufacturers could sell the brand medications without having to deal with those absurd PBM fees, which cause the high prices with the rebates, if they can go around that and straight to the consumer, our prices could come back down a lot more realistically. They'll still be high, but it could be a lot better.
Okay, let's back up a second because I want to really double down on a few things you said. So this formulary exclusive, so what you're saying is CVS Caremark contracted with Novo Nordisk for Wegovy for weight loss, which is semaglutide, and Eli Lilly was not in on the deal. So now every single person in the United States who has CVS Caremark as their PBM, whether they know it or not, through their insurance, is now only going to be able to get coverage for Wegovy and not Zepbound.
Right.
Is that correct?
Even though Zepbound has tested better, head-to-head testing, they cannot get Zepbound. They are stuck with Wegovy because of their PBM contracts.
That's wild. And you guys, you can't choose your PBM when you choose your health insurance. You choose your health insurance, and there's nowhere on there that I found, because the last time I got health insurance, which I'm sitting here like, why do I even have health insurance? I should probably just do that like shared healthcare thing. But that's another story for another day. I looked, though. I was like, who's the PBM in this policy? I couldn't find it anywhere. I dug and dug and dug. I'm sure it's somewhere in this giant contract I signed, but man, I looked and I couldn't find it. And then the direct to consumer. So what Brad's talking about here is, this is in September when my Instagram went down. The same week is the week that Eli Lilly launched Zepbound in the vial form. And it was direct to consumer, meaning you could go directly to the manufacturers of the medication. You could have your doctor submit a prescription and they would send the medication to you directly. So there's no pharmacy middleman. Do I understand this correctly?
There is a pharmacy, but there's no pharmacy benefits manager in the middle.
I see. So you have to go to the pharmacy to get it. They're not shipping it to your house, or
they are shipping it. There's a pharmacy. It's just their pharmacy. You have to contract with the manufacturer directly. The pharmacy does, but it still comes from a pharmacy to you.
Got it. Okay. There's just no PBM in the middle. And so they can keep the prices lower.
Yeah.
What do you think about that model? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that'll drive out independent pharmacies? And doctors.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get a hold of Novo Nordisk and see if I could sell their low cost Wegovy. You know, I couldn't get a hold of anybody, but I think that if it goes big time, they will begin to outreach to other pharmacies instead of just contracting with one. Eli Lilly has like 4 or 5 pharmacies that they work with right now, so I don't think it'll crush pharmacies. And there's a lot of manufacturers, so everybody could work with a different manufacturer, try to participate in some way. I'm not too worried about the effect that's going to have on pharmacies. And again, that's just going to be the brand medications. 90% of prescriptions are low-cost generics. My pharmacy dispenses almost no brands. So I don't think it's going to be a big problem for the small guys like me.
Okay, cool. Okay, right. So let's jump into some of the examples that you've shared on your social media about these crazy, like Medicare, just the sheer waste of money that's going out the door.
Okay, yeah. And remember, all these prices that I say here are Medicare prices, but Medicare is only about a third of prescriptions. Everybody else, 60% of people, I think, are on a self-funded plan, meaning their employer pays it. They're getting prices just like this, probably worse. Actually, in most instances I've seen, Medicare gets a little bit better price because they'll put you in jail if you overcharge them, whereas employers don't have that privilege. So your plan is probably like this, even though this is Medicare. But so one of the first ones I did was pirfenidone. Medicare spent $680 million on it. That was in 1 year. It was filled 85,000 times. The price on each prescription was $8,000. Our price is $200 for that same exact prescription. So if everybody filled that one at our price, it would have been $17 million total. So Medicare spent $663 million too much for the same thing. They could have covered everybody. Nobody would have lost any coverage whatsoever. They just would have saved $660 million. And all of that price went to just in the PBM price. And they have a nonsense number they start with. And because of that, they get to collect all that money.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. So instead of $200, they paid $8,000.
Yeah, $8,000
per prescription.
Per prescription, yeah.
And this is the PBM doing this to Medicare.
Right, yeah, because this is the price that I have. I buy that from the wholesaler. They sell it from the manufacturer. So this isn't big pharma that's the problem here, right?
Yes.
These are generics. This is the PBM jacking the price up so that they can profit, and it makes the premiums go up because the drugs are so expensive. They have to raise the premiums to cover it for everybody in the future. It's awful.
Can I ask you a question? I think you maybe covered this, but maybe I'm hallucinating. What's the deal with Medicare and the ability to negotiate pricing and how that's contributing to this? I feel like you've talked about that somewhere. So was that the Affordable Care Act where they explain that again? So they opened up the ability to, or they could or could not negotiate pricing, or did something happen in recent years about that?
Yeah, so you're talking about the Medicare price negotiations. That was in the Biden one.
Okay.
I forget what that one's called, but it was in the Biden one. There's 10 drugs that they started with that they could negotiate prices. They did go to negotiate those prices. A few of them were silly. It was drugs that are already have a biosimilar and a generic available. So it's it didn't really help that much. Some of them are pretty effective. One case, Januvia, that one was going to get negotiated. So they lowered the price preemptively, and then the insurance companies took it off the formulary. So it's been a bit of a mess. They're going to increase the number of them over the next few years. It might help. It's a little something. It always strikes me as total nonsense. We already pay the PBMs to negotiate the prices. The PBMs pay another company, the group purchasing organizations, to also negotiate the prices. And now we need Medicare on top of that to negotiate the prices. It's how many people do we need to negotiate these control prices? Just open it up, man.
Just go to Mexico and buy your drugs. Okay, give me a couple more examples of just lunacy.
Okay, let's see. Imatinib, that's another big one. $600 million spent on that one in Medicare. 250,000 prescriptions in just 1 year. Their price per prescription, $2,400. Our price, remember, price of the medication, 15% markup, $10 fee on top of that. Our price for that $2,400 prescription is $17. So the total would have been $4 million that Medicare could have spent. So of the $600 million that they wasted, $596 million of it was wasted. 99% of the money spent on that was totally wasted. Another one. Let's see. Abiraterone, $1.5 billion spent on Medicare. Let's see. How many was that? 440,000 people, $3,400 per prescription. Our price is $96. We could have done them all for $42 million. So $1.4 billion wasted overpaying for that medication. Again, no magic is happening. I'm not a master negotiator. I didn't read the art of the deal. This is just what the manufacturer sells it for. It's just right there to buy.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm. And the way that they get away with a lot of this is specialty drugs. Have you ever dug in on specialty drugs?
No, tell me.
So specialty used to mean that the medication was hard to manage, so you would have to be dealing with the pharmacy a lot, or it needed special handling, so the pharmacy needed to do something special. But lately, it just means it's expensive. They just want to control the really expensive medications. So the number of specialty drugs has increased since 2019, doubled. And then those are only about 2% of prescriptions, specialty, but they account for 45% of all prescription costs. So half of our drug cost basically is in 2% of prescriptions. And that's what a lot of these are. These are specialty generics. They're specialty drugs that have generics available. That's why I can sell them so cheap. They're specialty brand, and those are $20,000 a month. But these specialty generics are really where I could save people money. But the problem is that the PBMs also control who can participate in these specialty networks. So nobody is allowed to compete with them. If you're a retail pharmacy and you accept insurance, you're not allowed to sign contracts with specialty networks in order to receive specialty medications.
Wow. So you can get them though, because you're not contracted.
Yeah, I could negotiate with the specialty networks. I haven't done any of that yet. These are just like available to buy, because specialty only means expensive. It doesn't mean there's anything, these are tablets. There's nothing about them, but I could work my way into specialty if I needed to.
That's amazing. So to repeat what you said, the specialty drug costs account for 45% of prescription drug costs.
Yeah.
Is that what you said in this nation? Is that what you, like every year?
Yeah, nationwide, yeah.
Basically half of them are this whole gig over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. This is mind blowing. You guys, you got to follow Brad on Instagram, because every day I have this moment where I'm like, what is happening? It's so gross. I got into medicine. I wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid, and I got into medicine and I had a really great run, and then I burned out and I left practice, closed everything down around COVID time. And cause I was in Oregon and it was just Looney Tunes here and I was not going to participate in the craziness. And it was medicine's broken my heart. Like, it's just gotten grosser and grosser and grosser. And we don't go into this because we're trying to get rich. We go into nobody goes to, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and gives up years and years of their life in schooling so that they can like hose people on the other end. We go into this because we want to help people, but we're in this gross system and it like rubs off on you, mm-hmm. And the only way I think to stay out of it is just to completely stay out of it. And even staying completely out of it, I still burned out. So I applaud you for, at least you're in Texas, land of the free. At least you got that going for you. But man, it's just crazy. Your pharmacy is really cool. I've been to your website and you guys can go there. What is it? forestpark.com? Forest Park Pharmacy?
Pharmacy.com or forestpark.pharmacy. I had to go get a special regulatory thing to get both of those addresses, but yeah.
And then you can check drug prices there. Like you can look up.
Yeah, we have a price checker, which is great. And even if you're not, I can only ship right now to Texas, Ohio, and Indiana. So anybody in those states can use me as a pharmacy, but anybody else, I think that our price checker is a great tool. If you get a prescription, you should be looking at that price checker and to see if you're getting ripped off. The problem with my business is that I'm talking about saving people money, but a lot of these prices are back-end hidden prices. The price that people actually see is their copay, which isn't the price of the drug, isn't the price that anybody pays. It's just a price that they use to manipulate you into getting it or not getting it. If they want you to get it, they'll give you a low copay. If they don't want you to get it, they'll give you a high copay. But I'm cheaper than about half of copays. I'm cheaper than like everything back end, but about half of the time I'm cheaper than the copay. And you might be getting ripped off on the copay. So you want to make sure you're using that price checker. If you're getting ripped off, you can give us a call and I'll let you know where to find a pharmacy like mine. There's not many, but about half the states have somebody like me that'll be able to help you out.
Oh, you're awesome. You're doing God's work. This is crazy. I know you're putting your neck out on the line every time you make these posts. So I applaud you because they are mind blowing. And there is such a scandalous, gross permeation happening in this world. I mean, I'm almost concerned to even talk about it because it's such a behemoth of a mess, and people have no idea. And on that note, live a good, clean, healthy life to avoid lifelong pharmaceuticals if you can help. I know I'm definitely not judging anybody who needs them, but a lot of medications out there are somewhat avoidable or potentially sometimes I've even had patients. My favorite thing is to get patients dose down. So if they stay on it, I'm not judging, but the goal is like lifestyle and health first. It's like a teeter-totter, and then we can bring that drug list down or we can bring the dose down. And, oftentimes that can even help bring costs down. So, we're all responsible is what I'm saying. Like we all have to play our role in keeping ourselves as healthy as possible. So we're not slaves to this screwed up system. Okay. Right. Anything else scandalous that I missed that I didn't ask you about? Do we hit it all?
Yeah, that's all. I got a whole list of these drugs, $15 billion. There's a ton of them, but you can see it all on my page. Just go check it out.
Yeah, Forest Park Pharmacy, that's on Instagram, right? Is that everywhere? Are you on TikTok and everywhere else?
Yep, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, X.
Okay. He's everywhere. If you could leave the audience with a thought, is there anything you wanna share?
Just what I just said. The most important thing, in my opinion, is checking the price. You can always do better. So keep an eye on it. Don't let the insurance intimidate you. There's probably a way to save some money on it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Brad. That was I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you being on the show. I hope a ton of people come follow you, and I hope they come use your pharmacy, everyone who can, who's in the states where you're covered.
Appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to The Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.